that minute now under the shorts heading in YouTube got put out by the algorithm itself.
I'm worried that having your own independent opinion is not going to be allowed in the future.
It's very important to keep on challenging and be that wild spirit that's kind of going, why?
In the room, 52 Jokers Wild.
So here we are again. It's another Friday and it's In the Room with George and Garvin, hopefully. And today we have another guest with us. It's Rian Lanigan, who is also a podcaster into marketing and training, I believe, as well. And we're on a similar sort of journey, I think, in trying to, for us, develop our audience. And we're these blind men just going through the universe, trying to work out how everything works out. But we kind of get an idea that, Rian, you know a little bit more about this. Tell us a little bit more. How did you get started? Why are you doing what you're doing? And what are your plans at this point with your podcast?
Yeah, so originally what got me started on the podcast was I'm part of an organization called Sandler Training. And in that, there's a program called Leadership for Organizational Excellence. It's 13 blind spots that can hold back an otherwise healthy business. So we typically work with sales leaders in the tech space, and what I wanted to see was there an appetite for a program for business leaders, CEOs in Ireland, as the virus had hit. So I started the podcast with the objective of getting the attention of business owners and bringing them on and picking 3 or 4 of the blind spots that they had kind of worked out and overcome themselves, and talking about their kind of lessons, challenges, pivotal moments. And that was the first 7 or 8 episodes. And then I didn't really enjoy the podcast all too much when I was doing that. I had one podcast left on the agenda to record, and it was with a friend in the US. He is in Washington. And I didn't do any prep for it. I just said, heck, I'll just go on and talk and we'll go back and forth. And I enjoyed that podcast more than any other podcast I've recorded. He subsequently told me that it was a great podcast and I had a knack for talking and getting good details out of people. So I got a buzz off that, which then led me to filling my calendar with other podcasts and then sitting down and going, right, where do I want the podcast to go? What do I want it to be? And I've been working it out and changing and aiming for that North Star since.
You're talking about the blind spots. I'm actually currently doing a counseling course because I can see that there's a need to help other people. But the great thing about the counseling course is this sense of that you don't have to solve their problems. You're just helping them work out their blind spots so they can come up with a solution themselves. Is that roughly where? Well, tell us a little bit about your process. Then is that what you're hoping to try and do?
Yeah, that's it. So it's essentially the individual themselves does the work, and you kind of just guide them through the process.
What you're reminding me of is, like, I think we started off in a similar motion, thinking we're going to go on a journey of a startup in lockdown, and 2 shows in, we're going, actually, it's not that at all. It's a pub conversation. It's about life, universe, everything. It's us as individuals. It just happens, if you think of Tony Robbins, that one of your 5 projects is the business. Another one is your health. One is your wealth. One is your family. So there's a bunch of parallel things going on. And, we're not in business for business sake. We're in business for life's sake, to have that, to get enough money to pay the basic bills. Then the next step is, that's just a job. Do we want to make a difference in life? And we've suddenly realized we've gone 30 years into, careers and this, that, the other. We backed out a bit in the last couple of years, just as the pandemic hit. And we decided this is the passion project. This time around is for us. It'd be nice if we can monetize it. We believe we can based on our expertises, but at the same time, we've got, as you touched on it there, you've got to enjoy it. You don't go to the pub not to enjoy the conversation. You're not going to structure it so that it's too controlled. You want to see where it goes. You have a fair idea what the subjects might be, but you want to be there. You want to have a good conversation. If it's Dale Carnegie, or there's a bunch of Carnegies out there, it's make friends and influence people. And I think we're coming from, we know business will pop up in the podcast. We know life coaching will pop up, mentoring will pop up, and stories, most of all, should pop up from the guest and ourselves to go, because people want to know about the personalities, about the realism, how can you associate? So the good thing you said just the very, very beginning was, you done the functional, and a few in, you suddenly went, I have to be me. I've got to be myself, and I've got to enjoy this. And if I enjoy it, they might. So what do you think? Is that the sort of where you're at?
Yeah, and it was really looking at where I want to take it and working backwards from there ultimately led me to that. And keeping in mind, is there potential for a book 12 months down the line? Okay, if there is, how do I structure the questions that happen between now and 12 months down the line so that if I do want a book, I can have one?
There's a lot of mirroring going on here.
Yeah, there certainly is. What happened with us was we started looking at Julian Cameron's The Artist Way, and she was saying, look, write a journal every day. Just spend in the morning pages, just write three pages. Don't worry about what you put in it. And my sister started it, and she just went, write 3 pages, because she didn't know what else to say in it. I'm now on week 52 of that journal of writing 3 pages. I've kept it going. I now have, I'm on to my 6th volume of writing it. And it's just things that happen. And what you suddenly realize is that we've all been on this amazing journey. It's like we've seen the pandemic. We've seen a nutty president being kicked out of his office and somebody else coming in. We're seeing all these crazy things happening in the world, and I'm just journaling it. I'm just adding it into it. But what we're also finding is that it's kind of firing us up as we get started in the morning. It gets us thinking about things. And what we find is that it can lead on to certain things that we could start discussing in our programs or anything else that we're doing. And it also tells you you've got to take time out to go and to chill away from the things that you want to do, to shut down that chitter chatter box that you have inside your head that's telling you that you're no good, you want to give up, and you overthink. And I was working on some artwork the other day where we produced little animated characters and things. And I sat and went, am I wasting my time? Is this? And I went, shut up, just do it. And now I'm actually enjoying the process because I put on some records. I got some old vinyls and just put them on and was just chilling out in front of the computer, drawing these characters. And I'm nearly done. In the next few days, I'm hoping that this animated character will start to animate with a voice. You'll see it's actually of Garvin, so you'll get to see it. And you've got to push forward on some of those things that may take a little bit longer, and you're investing more time into it. But there is a value if you make it look really good at the end, and other people then start to watch things more, I think. And we're interested in different stories, and we're trying to find what it is that will generate those. And I write essays all the time, so I'm kind of structure them. I've been an editor throughout my career in editing television programs, and so I've kind of got into this way of writing a story. So you tend to just do your body text first, and then you work out your introduction, conclusion once you've actually finished, But the key thing is not to overthink the writing stage at this stage. Just start writing, get into the habit of writing the same way that you are with your podcasts. And then even just review the podcasts and maybe capture some of the audio, some of the discussion that's going on as little snippets that you can then package together in a certain way and make links to tell the story that you want to do. And you'll probably find, as we found, every half-hour episode that we do, there's about 7,000 words in the text, and it covers a broad range of information. And we just use Word to transcribe.
I wrote 3 words on the board over here, and I wrote an awful lot a year ago when we started podcasting, and everything actually from writing it self-fulfilled. 70 shows, and we're in the makings of it. One of those shows was called The Story of You, which is actually the story of us, the story of you. The only reason we're on this planet is our story, our family, our life. Business is just part of that story. But I mean, you've got to be interested in the story of you. Otherwise, you're not in the job you want. You're not doing the things you want to do. You're not going on holidays to the place you want to visit. So we wrote down literally last week, book, screenplay, film, in that order. And that's the next self-fulfilling prophecy for the year to come. And we have the makings of one book being, we've done 52 shows, and in those shows, we know there's life and business coaching. Literally, we're going to mine it and turn it into this self-help, self-coaching, self-motivation book. It just happens to be our story, us motivating ourselves in a startup. But the next one George is saying is we're in the business of film. So we're going to write the film of the process and the little hiccups along the way. And it could be like the film like Jack Black, where it's the film of the music school. It's what do you want to self-fulfill in the next year? Yeah, and that's what in business planning, it's the same thing. It's what does the successful business look like? Let's work back from it. What do I need to be doing now to get there? So the great thing when we were chit-chatting last week was you're saying, I'm going to do 100 episodes. I'm going to do 7 a week. I'm going to do them back to back. I'm going to give it 3 months of all I can to give it the kickstart it needs, but I have to enjoy it. It has to be something you want to do. Otherwise, you're using up the story of your life on something which you have to know why you're doing it. And the great thing is you've got a plan and you're implementing it. We're figuring it out in reverse nearly.
Something I don't know if you can see that on your screen. Yeah, somewhat. There's I'll put it up so you can actually see it later on. But it's called this is Save the Cat, and this is the second book. But the first book is the one to actually look at, and I'll get an image of that by a guy called Blake Snyder. And what's interesting is he sets out the premise that there are 15 segments in a film. Walt Disney's crowd came up with the same kind of idea, and it shows you all these different points. So if you sort of plan out on where your pages are and you hit those points within a 3-act play, you'll find that you'll have a really engaging and entertaining story. Now we've basically used a timeline in a mind map software called Simple Maps, I think it was. And we've actually sketched out this whole timeline of what's been happening to us over the last couple of years and putting those key points in, and then adding about, Blake Snyder talks about having about 45 different little segments in there that you then write about. If you break the whole thing down in that way, then all you're worrying about is writing what can fill in that bit just here, or what can fill in that little piece there. And then you're not having to worry about this massive book that could be 260 pages, 68,000 words or whatever you want to actually write it for. And I think breaking things down into those small component parts, and I'm sure that's what you do with your courses. Tell us a little bit about the courses. How would they work? How could you see that working in the story structure that you're planning yourself at this point?
That's an open question. That's a difficult one to answer. I mean, there are two different things here. The courses and the podcast are completely separate. So I can answer for the podcast if that makes it a little easier.
Yeah, go with that.
The podcast.
Yeah, sure. Well, you referenced that every hour you guys record, you get seven snippets.
Yeah, we get about 7. Yeah, we can do. Yeah. Out of every
we do
half
an average
hour
of 40 minutes, and we mine it for three snippets of 2 minutes, you might as well say. There'll be a lot more in there potentially, but we're saying, look, you go mining for diamonds and gold, there might be a lot more in there. There's enough, because you want to get them to jump from that to the show, to the bigger, this is the fly fishing. You want them to move to the bigger show and subscribe or that. But for LinkedIn's and for Facebook's, 2 minutes is actually too much. Actually, what we found today, very, very interesting, is we done a posting 5 days ago, and it was a minute. And that was a very rare something for us. If we don't stop talking, ours is an average 2 to 3 minutes. That minute now under the shorts heading in YouTube got put out by the algorithm itself and got our highest views on YouTube because it was just under a minute. Nothing to do with what was in it, nothing to do with any tag words we put in, purely based on the algorithm in YouTube now wants to push shorts. Now, the under a minute for Reels on Instagram, we found none of our stuff fits on Instagram. Even if we're not there, we've no choice, because everything is 2 minutes. So we've got to slice everything down to less than a minute to even have a choice of being on Instagram. And TikTok, I think you might get away with a minute on TikTok, and that's something we might investigate as well. So the weird thing is all the algorithms now are saying, can you bring it to a minute? Can you put something of value in that minute and make it be interesting, educational, informative, but do not sell? And LinkedIn particularly likes that as well, in the sense of your hold times are normally 20 seconds. And very rare does anyone actually, press play and hold on. So your statistics might be better than theirs, but normally they're going, what the hell, what's the rubbish they're talking about today? We'll have a quick look, it's more shite, move on. So we don't have that. We're not worried about what's in the content for the moment. We're more interested in the algorithm to be consistently turning up fit the algorithm, and then and get brand recognition for being there consistently with a peer group, and then in time reel them in if what you have. And the great thing about your shows is as well, it's not time dependent. That's a founder, that's a CEO, there's something interesting to say. That's a great thing. Hopefully won't age. And that's what we're hoping to do as well. So no, I don't know. I think I lost my track of thought there, other than the sense of there's three pieces, but you got to now be very, very mindful of which platform in order to fit and it be a meaningful piece, if that makes sense.
I've always found it difficult to agree with people when they, I'll give you a scenario. Someone will say, I like your podcast, but can we cut it to 25 minutes because I don't think people listen to podcasts longer than 25 minutes. And there's a great example of, well, Joe Rogan, one of the biggest podcasts in the world. He has 3-hour-long podcasts. So how do you know what the right length of a podcast is? So ultimately, to me, where I decided, or how I decided to promote the podcast was I looked at, well, who do I want? What audience do I want to build? Who do I want listening to the podcast? And then, okay, for example, let's say it's small business owners. Okay, well, if I can break it down further, I will, but just for this example, we'll leave that. Okay, where do they hang out online? What platforms, social media sites do they use? Do they use Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn? Okay, it's LinkedIn. Okay, so I've got a podcast and I'm going to use LinkedIn as one of the main engines to take people from LinkedIn to listen to the podcast, to build brand awareness on LinkedIn, to position myself as, a thought leader or a bearer of news or media. So, I can't post a full 45-minute or 60-minute clip on LinkedIn because they won't let me do that. You're limited to 10 minutes. Well, let's play around and test different things. I've got as you referenced, you aim for a certain amount of snippets. Well, in my 40-minute podcast, sometimes it's an hour, depending on what we talk about. I'll try and find 3-4 good snippets that are 2-3 minutes in length and take them and put them up and tag the person. And if it gets picked up and it gains some traction, great. More people view it. That helps me build my following. That strokes the ego of both me and the guest, but also then it drives more people and more awareness to my podcast. And if each snippet I put out can bring 10 new followers to the podcast, and that's going to help out the podcast in the rankings. And the higher up in the rankings I am, the more visible I am. You don't want to be sitting in the top 50. You want to be sitting in kind of the top 10 to get noticed at all in the rankings. So it all just ultimately you strip everything back and work out what audience am I trying to attract. And when I know what audience I'm trying to attract, where did I spend time? I don't have to be loyal to LinkedIn for life. I just have to be loyal while the attention of the people I want to get is there. If it moves to, like, here's a great one. I was in university several years ago, and at the time, Snapchat was the place to be, the social platform of choice. If you were to try to get someone's attention of that demographic now, you're probably going to have to be on TikTok. They'll laugh at you when you're on Snapchat. If you look at Facebook, when I was younger, Bebo and Facebook were the place to be. Whereas now, if you're on Facebook, you're considered old, ancient.
Yeah. That's I love what you're saying, because that literally in the last year, we're coming from operations. I'm a chartered accountant by trade and profession. I didn't have to go out looking for I'm more in business intelligence, working for telcos. I'm a subject matter expertise. Now I've given all that up. I'm now an executive producer in film making, a training academy, and in this co-host on a podcast, and we just stick to that. But now you're saying I'm not used to the language of what's my demographic, what's my psychographic, which platform should I be on? George is an editor and filmmaker, 20 years, and we're operations. Now all of a sudden we've got to be business development, sales and marketing if we're a 2-man team and we're running the business. And that's where you're suddenly going, what the hell is going on? TikTok, Snapchat, WhatsApp. 15 ways of talking to George, and he doesn't listen any which way I talk to him. He doesn't. We're spending more time trying to.
I'm the one that listens, Garvin. You're the one that doesn't.
You're the only one that listens. But the great thing about what you said is, it took us a couple of months when we were starting this process to realize exactly what you said. We don't understand. We've only got limited time, limited resources. Yeah. Where should we be at a minimum? LinkedIn, and because we're the decision makers, we're looking to court our peer group, not necessarily the customer at the moment, and particularly in the podcast space. We know who we're connected to, know where they are, and we're not selling. We're looking to be recognized and considered and make people aware, and that's enough. I post on Facebook, just go through the motions and going, YouTube, there's 1 billion people, 6 billion people on the planet. None of them are going to be our customers necessarily. You have to be, how close to you do you need to be to talk to your potential revenue generating customer? The great thing you said was, if you're trying to monetize your podcast, then they're further out, and it's the podcast becomes important, the subject matter becomes important. Whereas if you're trying to sell a product of a physical item or a service close in, you have to deliver it. Then you're going, the algorithms are a nightmare for people. They've all changed in the last week. Facebook, all of them. And now you're putting you can put a budget for pay-per-click, you can put a budget for I'll give an example. A friend of mine said he got a call from, I don't know if it was YouTube or Facebook during the week. He says, are you happy with your promotion? He goes, what promotion? He says, well, you've been running for 3 months. He says, I have. I didn't notice. Now, he was running it, and it turns out he's paying 2 cents a click. And he says he got 1.2 million views. He got 1 like, no customers, no call to action on a tour, on what they said was a targeted program that cost him 3,000 quid for nothing. Then he said, I don't know if any of it was real. My understanding of reality would have been a like, a comment, a share, a subscribe. But what I got was a bill for 3,000 quid for 1.2 million views that I don't know if any of those people exist. And I'm just paying for fresh air.
Well, one of the beauties of, although still a market in its infancy, I reference social. One of the beauties of it is there are people that have climbed to the top of it, and they've left a trail behind to kind of that you can look at and see. Okay, well, they did that. I should try this. They did that. They failed. But also, what I found, and it's not only me, there's a couple of others that have noticed, is B2C, B2B. B2C is business to consumer, B2B is business to business. B2C tends to, on the marketing side, be 5 to 7 years ahead of B2B. So it's, okay, well, let's look at the top of B2C out there, influencers, YouTubers, and see what they're doing a couple of years ago, and how can I be ahead of the curve in B2B so that I can be the one who is riding the wave when that particular wave comes in.
So you're positioning yourself in your mindset 2 years from now, nearly going, you have to do the work now to be there.
Well, I saw some of the big, let's say YouTubers, maybe 2 years ago, daily, put out videos daily, consistently for 2 years in a row. And when I look at the podcasters in my area, most of them would have it as a hobby, not their main job. Most of them would probably give up after the 7 episodes, but discard them for a second. Most of them would also put out 1 episode a week. So I said, well, let's just go off those 2 things alone. How do I differentiate myself? Well, let's go full at it. So now I'm different than just as a hobby. And 2, let's put out daily like the other big YouTubers did. And, Gary V's always saying to artists, the more songs you put out, the more chances you put yourself in a position to be lucky, the higher, of a chance.
That's it. You buy one lottery ticket, you have one chance. Yeah,
you will strike luck. So you also got to be strategic and smart at the same time. You can't just put out shit and expect it to turn into gold. You got to be smart. So you got to work backwards, but also, and it is full time putting out a podcast every single day that's 45 minutes to 35 minutes, because it's not just the 45 minutes, it's the editing, it's the SEO, it's the promotion, it's the finding another guest, it's the researching for a guest. Each 40-minute episode,
it's a full-time job. It is a full-time job.
Each 40-minute episode with editing, researching, finding, promoting is probably 6 to 8 hours minimum.
It's a day. It's a full day.
Yeah.
Actually, you're like this. I have a little, one of these motivational calendars beside me. I just usually flip it at random. And today's one that goes, it takes courage to push yourself to places that you've never been before, to test your limits, to break through barriers. And we're going, you're not a podcaster. We weren't podcasters a year ago. Now we're going, we're podcasters. We're doing work. We're putting in the planning. We're putting in the strategizing. We're putting in the energy. We're doing the operations, and we're doing the sales, marketing, and business development. And I just said the important thing there, you says, is that's operations. Content then is what becomes important afterwards, is the gold. The content, we will get better.
I'll give you this one. A friend of mine recently hit me up and he said, Rian, he has a website, and he said, in the last 3 months, I'd like you to guess. He asked me to guess how many people have downloaded one of the white papers that they have on their website. And I said, Jesus, I don't know. I don't even know what stat to go off here. It's too good. So anyway, it turns out that there was about 700 people in the last 3 months that had downloaded a white paper. Now I know, and if you ask anyone who reads white papers, very few people actually read the full white paper. It's kind of a gimmicky thing to download, but it brand recognition, brand familiarity, it helps with all that. In the same span, I could have had, let's say, just for argument's sake, 750 people also listen to a podcast. But the difference is I could have had those 750 people listen to me for 45 minutes compared to downloading a white paper. So I saw the value,
different value there, total different value.
We're finding that at the moment we're producing the podcast per week, but out of that, we're then mining the other bits and pieces that we give out on a daily basis. So we now are setting up different channels to do different things at different times to try and build that up and try and see if we can move people to the podcast and see how that works as well. Because ours is not, is yours a podcast and a video blog at the same time? Or is it just an audio podcast that you're doing?
Both.
You're doing both. You're recording both at the same times. Yeah, because there are technical problems that we've been finding. We record using 2 cameras at each end, and then we're now capturing the screen of the person that we're interviewing so that we can sort of edit it together.
I've heard that, assuming you've got all your technology nailed, I've heard that Riverside FM is a great piece of software for recording if you're having difficulty, because it records from both your end and the participant's end. So if anything happens on the participant's end, you haven't lost anything on your end. That's
called Riverside, is it?
Riverside.fm.
Because I know that, a couple of colleagues have been talking about an open source package for doing multi-camera stuff, but that's okay if you've got the multi-camera available to you. I'm not sure about different sources of webcam stuff. So that's just some of the technologies that we're kind of looking at. But again, I think the important thing is what we're finding is that the little pieces become more entertaining because we're in full flow, because we're capturing them from the main project, and just getting that energy level is being built up. It's not just a case of starting and stopping. You can see the energy level building up, and we can cut straight into the mid-flow part for the whole of that and then find a nice little out. And now we're going to try and do that. So it's just a minute long to go into the different type of platforms. So that's quite worthwhile. And again, I think what it is just trying to work out what the subjects are that we do. We tend to pick a subject and just talk it through as we go through. Whereas my background would normally be writing scripts and doing a lot of research and all that. Yeah. But I think if you're constantly reading and watching documentaries and watching other information, you're building up your knowledge base anyway that you can talk about.
Actually, if we go left field today, George, sorry for cutting across you.
Go on.
Let's do it.
It's May the 4th. May the 4th.
Yes.
So that's today. We're in Star Wars territory. So, are you a Star Wars buff? Have you used the Force?
You're going to hate me. I don't think I've ever watched it before in my life.
Are you a Star Trek fan instead?
Now, we don't need to
I don't usually like to watch TV, in fairness. I watch a lot of Prime and Netflix whenever I hang out with my girlfriend in the evenings, but for me, it would be a lot of YouTube is what I'd consume.
See, the gas thing is what we would do is we like our sci-fi, but it's not the sci-fi. Yeah. It's science fact, not science fiction. It's Star Trek territory. You have your mobile phone. You've got your nanotechnology. It's a journey from science fact to science fiction. And we also mentioned Elon Musk will probably have the Enterprise going to Mars and fully crewed and fully staffed. About 5 years time. So
or Jeff Bezos. Who knows who's going to win?
Yeah, exactly. That's another thing we noticed. When the richest people on the planet are making, plans to exodus the planet, there's something up. We're firm believers in ancient aliens and conspiracy theory in the sense of, there's something going on. Area 51, they're opening the doors. There's an awful lot more of, where technology is being released at an exponential rate now in the last 30 years. They reckon they're reverse engineering a couple of UFOs from Roswell. So what would your opinion on that be in terms of the tech boom in the last few years? Is there a little bit of alien input, or is it just a couple of monkeys with a lucky break?
I think if you believe in any of that stuff, it's nonsense. To be frank with you, I think if you look at the 4-minute mile, that wasn't broken for decades upon decades upon decades, and then I don't know, was it the 50s or 60s? Somebody broke the 4-minute mile, and then straight afterwards, in the next year, another like 50 people broke it. So I'd use that exact same study for technology.
Is that not just steroids?
I don't think so.
I tell you what, it's not aliens for sure.
Yeah. No, well then, what's your opinion on like the likes of the pyramids and the Sphinx going back, a couple of 100,000 years versus 40,000 years? As I said, we're running around our underpants all like full of hair, and we're literally mapping the stars to gigantic buildings and building them with a toothbrush. In terms of
what
technology.
else did they have to do back then? They didn't have Facebook and Instagram to be going on, did they?
No, they didn't have some of the technologies that we're actually looking at.
They had a lot of free time. What would you do with free time?
Well, we couldn't do it today is the whole point. That's insane. We couldn't, align to the stars with that amount of precision. Given the technology available today, you'd have problems. Going back 5,000.
That just speaks to it that if you strip back and go basic, you can achieve it and get more done than if you add nonsense upon nonsense and layer upon layer.
Now, do you think we've lost not an alien civilization, but maybe it was a big Noah's flood? What we have was a reset and a loss of ancient civilization and a reset. Therefore, the evidence is gone that they were there because there was flooding, there was like a couple of meteors, volcanic events, ice ages. That would have reset.
Hate me for this. You're gonna hate me for this.
Go on.
No, but that's the important part of it. That's why getting the different views is so important.
Yeah, for sure. Not a believer in any of that stuff, and I would also classify myself as an atheist.
I know atheist. Well,
but that's
George
good.
I'm an agnostic atheist. I'm just playing my hedge in the bets. Just in case you turn up at St. Peter's fucking gate and you go, "I told you so." Then it's no harm. The last minute.
Black my way in. If it's real, I'll black my way in. Fuck.
Well, you better have the coins on the eyes, otherwise you haven't got the couple of Bitcoin.
I have a doctor friend because I'm currently trained to be a deacon in the church. That's the journey that I find myself on. But one of my best mates is a doctor and he's an atheist, but he's already signed up and got his ordination as an online atheist, person that could do all those sort of things the same. He says, "Come on, George, I'm waiting for you to come so we can go into business together." So it's fascinating, and I think that's the key is getting conversations from very, very different perspectives, and especially ones that challenge from the opposite point of view. Because I think that's the only way that you can start to learn and see what the possibilities are. And I think that's what's interesting about the journeys that we're finding ourselves on. Because again, at the end of the day, we don't know. We just have to assume that we based on either the experiences we've had, the evidence that we're experiencing, the science, because I very much like the science side of things. I don't necessarily understand it all, but I think that's the key thing, is trying to work out why we're here and what can we do and what's blocking us. And what you were talking about, the blind spots that all your business people they obviously have blind spots so they can't see. And I'm aware that we've got our blind spots that's preventing us from just seeing what's around the corner. And it's that we're trying to work it.
There's a danger here, and I like that you don't fit into the category that I'm about to mention, but there's a danger with wokeness, if that's what you call it, that people can't have an opinion and you got to sit on a certain side of the fence. Whereas it's evidence that you might agree that aliens were a thing, but I completely disagree and think that that's absolutely crazy and ludicrous. But at the same time, I'm not saying that you're a bad person or that you should lose your job as a result. So it's healthy to disagree, but I'm worried that having your own independent opinion is not going to be allowed in the future. Well, they won't stop me having it, but
but I think that's something that's very key, is critical thinking and understanding what critical thinking is, and encouraging people to go out and start to analyze what the evidence actually is. Now, whether or not anybody believes in aliens or not, one of the things that's interesting from a media perspective is that we're being pumped a lot of this information. We're also being pumped disinformation about virtually everything. And I think a lot of people are just kind of going, what the hell is going on? How do we get a handle on certain activities so that we can somehow make sense of the world that we're in so we can actually move forward? And a lot of the technologies that we're using, although it's great because we communicate, we're communicating with you, we're communicating with Garvin in different parts of Ireland. Later on today, I'll probably be talking to my son in Canada. People in Australia. The technology has brought us, in some cases, closer together. But we're now having to go through a screen to do this, which is where the science fiction of Star Trek and 2001 was interesting, because they showed you ideas back in the 60s of this sense of a TV screen. I mean, the computers that we're using now, the basic designs were in 1947, they came up with the designs. They just hadn't figured out the technology to create and deliver, but they knew it was possible. And ever since, the basic computer that you buy now out of the box is that same module that they designed back in 1947.
I'm going to go one interesting one now, because I'm reminded of a show we did earlier on, one of our early shows, and I was called The Universe. I was talking about the Fibonacci numbers. And the thing is, my daughter is very interested in physics, and she had a book here, and I picked up the book, and it was a journey of classic physics to quantum physics. And the whole journey of that was meant to disprove the existence of God. And by the end of the book, they said they actually managed to achieve the opposite. They were left with perfect maths and an element of the unknown. And again, the journey started more to prove that this is a construct. The maths is too perfect. Everything down to the minuscule and the macroscopic and the microscopic is replicated and multiplied, and these numbers keep on appearing with precision and exactness everywhere in the universe and on the planet, that it was designed. And I am an atheist, an agnostic atheist at that, but that was a very interesting book to go. The journey of physics was to disprove, and by the end of it, they put their hands up and says, actually, it's at the proving this other unknown factor exists, and we're the observer, whatever you want to call it, because we're on a journey to definition. And when we can define everything, we've removed the unknown element. And every time we got to another microscopic element of it, it proved a bigger unknown.
Yeah, because I'm a Christian. I believe in what I believe, and I'm not going to preach about what it is. But I'm on a journey to discover, why do I believe what I believe? And I know lots of people come up with arguments against it. And I kind of go, but the experiences I'm having kind of still go back and prove what you've just been talking about there in science, which is why I love reading the science, because the more and more I look into the science of things, it seems to be indicating that there's an agent, doesn't matter what you want to call it, that seems to be in somehow organizing us, and it's trying to work out what that is. I'll never know, because that's the whole point. But I must say that I'm actually enjoying the journey that we're on by talking to people and discovering the most important thing is to discover why other people believe the opposite to you, and how does that fit into the model of the world that you have yourself. And again, why do we have the model that we have ourselves? And that's the reason why I'm interested in the way the media comes across, and the way that stories are putting across, and the way that organizations tend to come together, because it does open up into a broader and broader sort of spectrum. Most people that I do know who are, a lot of people who have had a faith as children have never questioned their faith. They're still where they were, maybe as old people, in where they are from the very beginning. They've never questioned, they've never challenged what it is. And I feel it's very important to keep on challenging and be that wild spirit that's kind of going, why? The little 4-year-old.
Actually, the mirror there in business is a journey for, that's the other side. It's the entrepreneurship, the disruption. In other words, if you keep on saying there's no more new products, no new services, or you can't do something slightly different. And you're on the journey and we're on the journey. We made a statement 2 years ago saying, we're going to go disrupt this particular part of the market in microfilm production. We don't know how. We just know the market's demanding to be disrupted, and innovation is needed. And it might be an idea, it might be a process, or it might be just an action or personality even. But you are on a journey to basically create a new personality, excuse me, in the podcast space. Because okay, everyone does business shows, we do business shows. No, it's not about the format or the structure. The difference becomes the personality and the conversation. And it's about the difference, not about the same. And that's what look, are we a podcast show? Well, we enjoy it. We enjoy the conversation. We're hoping someone else might enjoy it too if we capture it. But it's not forcing it down someone's throat. It's not saying this is entertaining, watch or listen. We're just saying we enjoyed it. We depict a market out there and 6 billion people. There has to be a bunch of us out there, and we like that they might too. You know, bingo, and the same with yourself.
Bingo.
And I also think
we have to find that audience. You know, the tech is
it's finding an audience, but it's also finding people that disagree as well, which I think is fantastic. If everybody agrees with it becomes boring.
The strange thing is, your biggest viral something is actually the ones that disagree. They're the ones that are going to comment, share, give out. They're the ones you want, because the others are passive.
Absolutely. No, you're right there. Certainly, unknown brand ambassadors per se, because they're the one that are extending the reach of your podcast, which ultimately is what they don't want to do.
Yes,
that's the very thing. You want to rise them. You want to annoy them enough to go, they'll put it out. But then the audience that gets it will actually be, by the very nature of it, they'll have their own opinion. They go, well,
you got to be careful.
That's the whole of testimonial marketing, nearly.
It's an element and it's a strategy, but at the same time, you don't want to not deliver the content to your core audience that you're ultimately there to serve, or whatever word you want to insert there. But it's not a
Say
bad
true to yourself.
thing.
Exactly. You're not doing it for them, but you'd like them to engage and go, they don't like, as you said, if we're saying Star Trek, science fiction, the journey from science fiction to science fact or fantasy, and they go, no, I'm an agnostic, I'm an A, therefore it doesn't, that's fine. We're just saying this is a view.
As long as it doesn't turn into something like what Hitler achieved, then you should be all right.
Oh, no. Actually, we did have a show, but the Hitler we came up with was Summertime for Hitler, which was actually the producers and Mel Brooks. So it was that's as close as we're going to get to that subject.
I think actually, if Hitler had a podcast, he wouldn't have actually wanted to conquer the world. He would have been quite entertained doing what he was doing, and that would have satisfied all his needs. That he was deprived of this technology. I think that's probably what the problem was.
I won't even go there, John. That's too dangerous a subject matter area. We'll veer back from Star Trek to, you have your audience. Are you giving yourself a drop dead date? If this is the passion project, you're saying, if I'm not successful by, not that the success is measured by a monetary something, but again, as I said, there's an energy level of, you'll have to give it to, but you can't keep on giving if the audience doesn't give back.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, to answer your question, 12 months is the answer, but I'll know sooner than then as to whether it's a green light or not.
And you find yourself now getting more passionate as you roll out the podcast.
It's pretty much my 100% focus at the moment. That has been for the last 3 weeks. I mean, prior to you guys, I had I actually had a guy who was a BAFTA nominee on this morning. I had 2 other people, and I have another one after you at 4:00. Loving every moment of it.
Well, that's the thing. You're getting that's the weird thing. I see this as Dale Carnegie thing again, and again, I might be quoting the wrong Carnegie. You're making friends and influence people. You're having conversations that you'd never have otherwise.
Yeah, but like, here's another way to look at it. At the end of 2021, if you do a podcast every single day of the week, excluding weekends, you just had an hour conversation with 220 to 260 business owners.
That's it.
Mm-hmm. That's
and even if you convert, well, it's not to convert 1 or 2 or others. It's more, you're not selling any of them. The weird thing is, as you said, you're giving access to those conversations to others that they wouldn't have otherwise had. Which is great.
I think also
you're stimulating conversations that wouldn't otherwise happen.
Yeah, I think also the other benefit of these kind of things and talking to as many different people from as many different backgrounds as possible is what we can learn from those conversations. We learn so much from the chats that we have. We're amazed by what we hear and what we see. and I've been interviewing other people, and everybody has a unique story. It's so different. Doesn't matter which background they're coming from. They have a unique story. And you're also seeing that even people that seem to be fairly high up in the rankings or whatever, they're just humans. They're the same as us. They're the same, and they have things to tell us. They have the same fears, the same worries, the same, it may be on different scales, but when it comes down to it, they're living in the same 24 hours that we are, and they're having similar sort of problems. So I think there's a massive
treat
value.
it like that, when you treat it like that, you can get some guests that you would only dream of. In the podcasting world, I have this kind of let's say look at it as a ladder, and you rank each guest fit into a different block of the ladder, level 1 to level 10. A level 1 guest would be someone that you could pick up your phone right now, call them, ask them to be a guest, and they'd be a guest in a heartbeat. A friend, a close friend, a family member. A level 10 is like, you referenced Tony Robbins, Garvin, earlier on. A level 10 in your industry could be a Tony Robbins. And then there's people between that, and you can fill in the blanks yourself. Well, when you start a podcast, your best strategy for growth is to climb the ladder in order of 1 to 2 to 2 to 3 to 3 to 4. Because if you go and try get a guest of a ranking of an 8 when you've never had a 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, it's going to be very difficult. But if you work your way from a 1 to a 2, and every now and again you can use a Mario Kart hop to get a double jump.
Yeah.
But what I found is sometimes when you're sitting around a 5, you could chance your arm going for an 8. You could ask, and if you position it correctly and show them the benefit, you could land yourself an 8, and you could excel your growth a lot faster than other people, because they don't know how to ask, and 2, they don't ask.
I love what you just said, because we had a strategy during the year, and it was the same thing. You can join my language is you join queues. You can get into the bottom of the queue if you want. You're going to join that queue, and you may never get to the top of the queue. When you get there, there was one door, and that was already given, and you're back to the start again. Or you can skip the queue. When I was going to nightclubs as an 18-year-old, I skipped queues. There were no queues. You went straight to the bouncer. You got thrown away a couple of times. Next week, you're buying the bouncer a drink. All of a sudden, you're in. And they're waving you up the queue. So the game here is there's no queues. Go for the top, and you might aim for Mars, hit the moon, and you get something. But say you have an outside risk play. So okay, I agree with what you're saying. You don't get put off by a rejection of the 10s, but you bank the 1s and 2s. You do a Mario Kart jump to a 5 every now and again. You're looking for an influencer in the game that changes all the rules. Because if you get, as George says a lot of the time, it only takes 1 to make a difference. One person, they find all of your stuff, and they say, I like 1, and it opens up the catalog. So, given you have power now, and you have a limited life on this planet, time is of the essence. Your money, you can go, the stopping you most of the time is ourselves putting in a chatterbox, I'm not worthy, when actually you could go in at a par and they'll have the crack with you, because everyone is treating them as a 10 and not as a real person. So if you can level the playing field and just have the crack and open the door, ask and you will receive. Ask the universe and it will give you it.
Yeah, when you get a 8 or 7, just remember that 8s hang around with other 8 and 9s. So the fastest way to get a 2nd and 3rd 8 and 9 is to ask that 8 afterwards for a
to open the door further. Yeah. So don't go. I mean, we cannot. You're skipping the queues now. We're skipping the queues now. We're not asking to get onto other people's podcast shows. Me and you and George. We're going. Feck it. We'll create one. Because now we'll actually change the rules and go. We'll have everyone guess this direction rather than us be a guess that direction. Now you're saying, put the quality in though, put the brand, put the operation, put the process in. At any point, the quality in the center can move. But as long as it wasn't a bad something and it was aspiring of growth, it can accelerate faster. And because we're courting the peer groups, in Ireland, 10 records is top of the pops. You don't need 1 million sales. You become visible in the country at a peer group level faster than anywhere on the planet, because the planet is in Ireland. All the social media companies are here in Dublin. You're on a world stage with your current number of followers just in the Irish and UK market. that's the weird thing. The mountain will come to Muhammad if we play the right game.
Well, look, we've come to the end of this show again. It goes past very, very quickly, and when we have a very interesting guest with us, it's fantastic. We've gone from talking about podcasts, talking about trying to find our audiences. We've ended up having topics which diverge from what we believe to what Rian believes, which is fantastic because it's that diversity of conversation, which is so important, which led to the idea that you've got to be critical thinking in what you're doing. And I think that's why it's exciting to have, new guests on to bring a new sort of blood into the mix to just get us thinking about things in a totally different way, which I think is fantastic. And we've ended up there looking at how do we get the rankings going up by the types of people that we interview? And I think the great thing there was the fact that we need to gradually build ourselves up, but don't be too frightened to jump a couple of steps up and try and pull in some of those audiences from the higher grades at some point when you're getting close to there. So I think that's a very useful piece of information for me and Garvin to sort of take away. So again, thanks very much for joining us on this episode, Rian. And I hope that you'll come back maybe in 6 months' time so we can see how you've done and what you've learned from that. And maybe we can share our learnings as well and see if they're matching up or if they've gone in totally different directions. That would be fantastic. So I look forward to having that conversation with you then. Any last words, Garvin, just before we finish?
Yeah, I'm just remembering, I'm back in my dating game. Because Rian gave me the schedule and the ladder 1 to 10. And I'm going, I never said I go through the 2s and 3s first now, and I might settle for a 6 or 7. No, I was straight for the 9 and 10. And she usually had a bunch of friends that felt a little bit uglier, and you ended up with an 8. But if you start courting the 2s and 3s, it's very hard to go up the ladder from there, I'll tell you. So it's best to go for the one you want and get the rejection and end up with a friend. But we'll see how that works in business. I don't know.
Well, look, thanks, everybody. And we'll look forward to hopefully you watching next week. Bye for now.
Thanks a lot, Rian. We'll see you soon.
No worries.
Hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe and click on the bell for notifications.